Okay, so welcome back to the Barstoolers Premier League podcast. After the international break, we finally had another weekend of games, and it was probably not the strongest weekend of games. What was your favourite game of the weekend you thought was the best?
In terms of most exciting, probably you would have said the Villa and Brighton match. Surprisingly, I thought it was probably going to be a bit more of a tighter match. Really end-to-end stuff, and shockingly, Danny Welbeck was probably man of the match, which I didn't think I'd ever be saying that in 2020. But yeah, he was really good end-to-end. Bit of drama at the end there. I know me and Mixer disagreed upon this all over the penalty. Villa had a penalty overturned in the last minute. There was a challenge came in from Solly March on, was it Trezeguet, I think? It was Trezeguet or El Mohammadi. Looked like he did get the ball. I know some people were trying to make the case that, he went followed through on the player, but he got the ball first. I think it was right to overturn that. Other than that, I mean, Villa, again, they got caught out on the counter-attack twice, and for the most part, that's where all of Brighton's play came from. I've said all year, Brighton, while they're not brilliant, they've always looked fairly decent on the counter-attack, and I know Tariq Lamptey ended up getting sent off late on the match, but he was probably one of the standout players again, so yeah, really exciting match.
Yeah, Danny Welbeck actually finished a 1-on-1. It was basically a carbon copy of the time United were playing Bayern Munich, and he went 1-on-1 with Neuer, and he tried to chip him, and Neuer just kind of stood up, and it was like, cannot believe Danny Welbeck has blown that. But it was a good finish, but I was shocked by how high Villa's line was for that. There was a lot made of United conceding from their own corner in Istanbul a couple of weeks ago, but this was basically as bad.
Oh yeah, it's pretty bad now. Equal comments made to Liverpool's high line against Villa, which was so clearly punished, and fair enough, but Villa going and doing it themselves while they're flying high, it's not great to see, is it?
I think it was a good win for Brighton, because I think we've sort of battered this drum before, that Brighton, they're a good team, and finally they actually won a game. The table's not going to tell you that, but to get a sort of a narrow win like that is important for them, I think, because they don't always do it.
Especially when they have to do a lot of defending as well. Because I know the 3-0 win they had against Newcastle, it was kind of more of a comfortable win. Newcastle didn't play very well. But for this match, I mean, Villa were only level for a very short period in the second half. Like, they had to defend the lead for pretty much 60, 70 minutes, which, I mean, probably stands to... It's got to give them a little bit more confidence at the back, because they have been leaking goals a little bit. Even though you would have thought that back three would have been pretty decent of Webster, Ben White and Lewis Dunk. Top Ben White was brilliant again. It's just kind of something, because you can play, it's like Ireland at the minute. They're playing well, but they're just not getting that result. Once you kind of get one or two results underneath your belt, it's kind of gives you the confidence to push on and maybe get a few more.
I think it's just a lack of quality in Brighton's team, really. I think Graham Potter's a fantastic manager. I really like him, but there's very few players in that Brighton team that you could point at and say, oh yeah, he can come up with something special. Maybe Trossard, Mopé's okay, but generally speaking, it's nothing special. So I think they'll definitely be down there.
Yeah, I think it's a very workman top two, like Welbeck and Mopé, but it might suit them more. Like, you give Potter, Grealish and Watkins, you see what he does then. I mean, you could argue with that they're better than Villa, because that back five is solid. And like, Matty Ryan's not to be sneered at either, and now there's Martinez now, but give him Grealish and Watkins, see what he does. So that's how small the margins are, and Villa are very fortunate to have two quality players.
The only thing that was just pointed out really was, without Ross Barkley on the pitch, I know Ross Barkley had to go off very early in the match. I think it was the second minute. Without Ross Barkley on the pitch, Villa kind of struggled creatively, because there was literally everything was going through Jack Grealish, and he still had a pretty good match, I thought. It was just everything was going through him, and he normally has Ross Barkley, who's this season he's normally had Ross Barkley, who's there to kind of help pick up the slack there in terms of creativity. But they only really kind of had that one out ball, or that one kind of creative spark in the midfield that they otherwise would normally have with Ross Barkley as well as Jack Grealish.
And he had two international games in the legs there, which is very important to say on Grealish's behalf. It reminds me a lot of last season Grealish. He did look isolated out on the left, and people were doing the running for him, and it just didn't really suit Villa in the game at all.
But undoubtedly the match of the weekend going into it, and it was an interesting spectacle, I would say, was Tottenham's 2-0 win against Man City. Now, when we were predicting the game, I thought it would be kind of similar to last season, where City would dominate the ball, probably get more shots off, like probably even a higher XG and stuff, but would lose the game. And that's basically what happened. It's an absolutely horrific matchup. And you could tell from the first minute in that game, couldn't you? Just Tottenham just counter-attacking that poor City defence.
Yeah, of course you could. You could especially see on the second goal. Kyle Walker has been exceptional clearing balls off the line, last minute, last stitch, everything. But he's just pushed up far too high. And he didn't run. To be fair, he didn't run back, but he was never getting that ball, even with his pace. Like peak Kyle Walker's never getting there. But De Bruyne just not doing his running. You think he could have done more to stop Lo Celso, but yeah, it's very worrying from City because there's a lot of money spent in that back line. Like Ruben Diaz has slotted in quite well, but it's ultimately a Mourinho masterclass, isn't it, lads? Like, just not a great matchup of managers.
Spurs played really well. Like Kane, his hold-up play and just as we passes off the break were class. 2 counter-attack goals finished nicely with Son and Lo Celso. He's kind of was saying that it was City dominating the ball, but what else would you expect from Man City? That's what they do. But what's the point of having all that possession if you're not going to do anything with it? We're so accustomed to them running down the line, cutting in the box, and then having a wee drag back into the box and a shot, and it was a goal. Like Sterling running down the line, but Reguilon was exceptional. He was really good, and he was really impressive at the weekend.
What is it that you think's changed about Man City? Because there was that aura of invincibility where they got 100 points, 98 points or whatever it was, where generally speaking, letting them have the ball wasn't a good idea because they'd break you down. You've seen teams who tended to press, like the likes of Liverpool, would cause them problems because they weren't comfortable getting pressed. And when you seen a team go out there, try and defend for their lives, it wouldn't work. But now, over the last season or two, or last season and this season so far, that doesn't seem to be the case. I just don't have faith in them breaking down the team. And the only attacker they've really lost is David Silva. I know they've lost Leroy Sané, but he's not the type of player that would break down a low block. What do you think's changed about that?
I was about to say, I think it's just our attack because they still got a lot of creativity in midfield because Bernardo Silva still kind of plays more of a deep role in midfield instead of an attacking role. And De Bruyne's kind of more like playmaker in the midfield. What I said, like especially this year and last year, they've been missing Aguero quite a bit, especially this year. I think I did last year, he was still kind of around. But even our front line, Sterling, it's hard to say where they've gone wrong exactly because Mahrez doesn't look brilliant. He looks fine against the smaller teams that are kind of easier to break down at, but I don't think I've seen him step up against any of the big six really in any of those games at all. I don't think that City team, I don't think he's going to be one that's going to kind of win them the big games. Up front, Jesus is good, but again, he's not. I don't think he's going to score you 20 goals a season. I don't think he has even reached that milestone for City yet, albeit he's never really had a prolonged run the team because Aguero was Aguero. He's not really going to get shafted out of that City team. I don't really know what else it is. I think it's maybe just teams have gotten a bit used to the side of football. I don't know, maybe that's kind of something that happens.
I think the problem lies in midfield. Like your David Silvas, your Fernandinhos, and obviously your Agueros too. Like these old City signings are the best signings that the club's ever made. I mean, arguably De Bruyne now as well, but De Bruyne's very isolated there. Rodri isn't a like for like with Fernandinho. He's just watching him on the ball. He just looks uncomfortable at times. He's just not going to be that shithouse that Fernandinho is that they need right now. And David Silva's creativity, like they have a lot of fairly similar players, but not David Silva in there. And De Bruyne looks a bit lonely, and he's undoubtedly one of the top 5 players in the league, but he's looking like a bit of a cross merchant at the minute, and he's looking a bit lost. And no one's finishing them City crosses off at the minute. That's just it.
Yeah, I wonder maybe it is trying to replace players. They failed to replace players because they lost Vincent Kompany, and Vincent Kompany, they don't have a leader in the team like Vincent Kompany was. I know maybe there's a bit more to win a league title than just having a good leader in the team, but there's nobody in that team that's going to kind of take the game by a scruff of the neck, and they're not going to pick players up when they're 1-0 down or 2-0 down. Like you saw it time and time again when Kompany was at City. If they were ever struggling to get a win, or they ever need to, if they were just struggling to break teams down, maybe he wasn't the one to that was going to break the teams down. But at least you had someone on the pitch with a little bit of charisma. There's nobody on that City starting lineup that's going to scream at players and going to.
De Bruyne did it actually. Did you hear that?
Yeah, he's
the
going
commentary
mad.
off. It was brilliant. That's what I'm loving about this lockdown football. You get to hear little snippets like that. But yeah, essentially, you're not looking to. What was De Bruyne saying in the Champions League post match?
Let me talk. Let me talk. I think the problem lies with Raheem Sterling. Since he's let his hair grow out, he's less aerodynamic, so there's more air drag. So he's not running as fast to get to the end of these crosses from De Bruyne. Shaves the head. City are winning the league. That's the problem.
It's a pretty dodgy haircut, it has to be said.
Oh, it's tragic. He made fun of Chunks for having a bad hairline. Yeah. He started laughing at him, but
and his Movember effort as well. Just the combo is just giving me Narcos vibes or something. It's terrifying.
Maybe bold managers just need bold players to get the results.
Yeah, he'd be so much quicker.
Vincent Kompany didn't have hair. Just saying. Yeah. No, he did Silva when he was finishing up at City.
Fernandinho, bald.
Exactly.
They need no hair.
Do you think it's almost a mental fatigue of breaking teams down because they were so good for so long? Like, that's the only thing I can think of. Because you see these teams who have great period of success and they just can't replicate it after a while. And like, you look at City, their team really isn't any different than sort of 3-4 years ago. You had Aguero there, you had Sterling there, Bernardo Silva, Mahrez, all these boys, De Bruyne, all these boys have been there for at least 3 or 4 years.
I don't even think they were particularly that bad last year. This year they've had a poor start. I don't think there's any getting around that. But even last year, the 2 years previous last year, they got 198 points out of, what was it, 220 something, which is ridiculous. But last year, like they still weren't even that bad. It was just the fact that Liverpool was so good. I think City still ended up getting, they got over the 80-point mark, and maybe we're still probably below where they wanted to be. But there's been plenty of seasons where the points that City got would have won them the league or would have had them at least challenging for the league. I think when people were saying City were bad last year, I think they're overestimating how bad it was. I think they were still very good. It's just Liverpool were just kind of on another level last year to what people were expecting. Because, like I said, Liverpool didn't lose a game until the 28th match. And before that, they'd only dropped 2 points. Like, you're never going to keep up with that, no matter how good you are. I know City did do that the year before. When they've done that for 2 years previous, it's really, really hard to keep up that standard for 3 years in a row. I don't really know about this year. There seems to have been a little bit more of a drop-off. I don't really know particularly why it's happened, but maybe it is just that little bit of mental fatigue.
Perhaps after signing a new contract, well, not quite a new contract, but I think he extended his contract by a further year, so maybe he knows something that we don't.
Klopp did the same actually as well, sorry. See that 2024 Klopp's here too.
No, I don't know. Yeah. But moving on to other matters now, we have a very good interview coming up pretty soon in this episode with James Carew from Póg Mo Goal magazine, and he's an Arsenal fan, so we talked about Arsenal, but you lads weren't present during that, so I need your take on Arsenal's situation at the minute. Performances are poor, results really aren't much better. Is Mikel Arteta just David Moyes with a nice haircut?
I have no idea. I genuinely cannot figure out Arsenal at all. Like, I wish I could tell you what I think is wrong with Arsenal. I think their squad overall is pretty shit. They've got 1 or 2 good players in there, but their overall squad just isn't good at all. Honestly, I'm clueless because I don't know how you fix that situation. It's kind of like Liverpool when we were growing up. They kind of come off the back of a few successful years, and then they 3 or 4 years, or 4 or 5 years even, where they couldn't get near the top 4. Maybe they just need to change how everything's structured at the club, because things didn't really change Liverpool until Klopp came in. They got rid of the transfer committee. The board kind of stopped getting in the way of on-field affairs and what was happening in the dressing room. I don't know how you fix that situation, because they've tried replacing Wenger, they tried replacing Emery. It's still not particularly working out. Maybe they just do have to give Arteta time. I have no clue though.
Look, it's I think the crux of the issue is Stan Kroenke up at the top. Like, none of his franchises, be they in America or here, have won a league title when he's been the majority shareholder of the franchise or club in Arsenal. And he's out there buying $750 million plus ranches. So you have to question the commitment there. Ultimately, their aim as a project is to get Champions League football year on year. That's the goal of Arsenal Football Club. It's not to win a single trophy, although Arteta did very well to win the FA Cup. So I just believe that's the problem. And there's misinvestment, the Ozil contract you can point to. Now Aubameyang is looking Like, he signed the thing and it's not going well. There's just not a lot about them, and Pepe is a disgrace. Like, and Arteta coming out and throwing him under the bus, I think that's going to blow up in the media soon as well. Like, he's finished at the club, Pepe. Like, he's over as a Premier League player. And the young lads are really good and they try a lot, and they've got a great youth system. But God, it's just not enough to get them over the line. I don't even think they're going to get top 4 this season. I don't think it'll be down to Arteta, to be honest with you.
I think the main problem is recruitment. I think they linked to all these players during the summer hour war, and then they signed Partey at the end of the window. They only signed one player, and then you think they're marquee signing Nicolas Pepe, more like Nicholas Pepe. The man was nearly £80 million. And when Tim Sherwood said, if he cost this much, how come Jack Grealish would cost 150 million? And when he said that, I was like, you're an idiot. But now when you think of it, like, if he was worth that much, Jack Grealish is considerably better than that man. And he's just so bad. Partey and the boys, like, they just need more firepower in midfield. They have no creative spark for midfield. Got rid of Ozil, and he's on this mad contract. Aubameyang, after signing a new deal, and he's awful. Like, he got the contracts, like, he doesn't care anymore. They didn't sign any centre backs. They've no midfield. They're just dreadful. They're a hopeless club at the minute, in need of some serious top ups in the first team squad.
Just on what James is saying as well, like the young lads that come in, like that's another comparison you can kind of draw on to early 2010s Liverpool. It's like that Liverpool they didn't spend a whole pile of money on players, and then when they did, they overspent. Like, you look at Andy Carroll, spent 50 million on him. He was on mad wages and he wasn't very good. You could quite compare that to Pepe, and then even at that, like, Liverpool had a load of young players coming in. You had the likes of Jay Spearing was playing, Jordan Ibe kind of came into that team as well. John Flanagan, who wasn't particularly good, like David and Go and all them. Like, it is. I do think there's a lot of similarities between Arsenal now and Liverpool 5 or 6 years ago. Kind of trends in football. Teams are on the way up and teams on the way. It goes in cycles in football. I don't think Arsenal are going to be like this forever, but I do think it's going to be another 3 or 4 years before it kind of sorts itself out.
It does go in cycles, but unlike sort of American sports where you can tank, you can finish bottom and then get a good draft pick, it doesn't work like that in the Premier League. You need to be a well-run club. This is why I have no hope held out for United having any real success over the next few years, because structurally we're an absolute disaster. But we did expand on that on my conversation with James from Póg Mo Goal, so you'll hear that later. So we're going to go through a little quick-fire one here. United bet West Brom. It was a bit of a non-event. I tweeted about that. United did just enough to win. I've seen some people saying it was horrendous, putrid. It wasn't quite that bad. Now, we absolutely have to improve. Again, at home to West Brom, United need to create more than that, assert themselves more. But, we did just enough to win. And it needs to be improved on, without a doubt. Seen Chelsea went away to Newcastle and won 2-0. Pretty comfortable victory, but I think Timo Werner's performance was a bit concerning. Absolute stinker performance.
Don't say anything about him. Don't say a thing about Timo, right? He's coming in a big way this season, right? 1 assist that game. It's not looking great, but his German brother Havertz out the side. You look, other big signs out the side. 2-0 win away at Newcastle. It was 2-0, wasn't it? I'm not talking in my arse here.
Yeah, it was 2-0.
Yeah, and I watched the game. That's how interesting it was. He did miss a few chances, but look, on another day, I think he scores. He's one overturned for offside, and it was offside. I think when he starts hitting form and he's everyone around him, I think Chelsea will be a really interesting attacking prospect, but I don't think it'll come at the right time. I think they're due an L next week against Spurs. I know we're going to get on to that, but yeah, that's how I feel at the minute.
A little sneak peek of your preview there. But then other matters in the Premier League, Everton managed to get back to one in ways with a 3-2 win away to Fulham. Attacking looked brilliant. Defensively, bit shaky. Wolves and Southampton played a bit of a boring 1-1 draw. I think we were expecting a better game there, but that tends to be the way it goes. Moving on to the next part of the podcast, we have an interview with a very special guest, James Carew, the co-editor of Póg Mo Goal magazine. Okay, so delighted to say we're joined on the line by co-editor of Póg Mo Goal magazine and website, James Carew. So how are you, James?
I'm good, Connell. How are you? Thanks for having me on.
No problem at all. I think it's a really fascinating guest. So, if you're not familiar with Póg Mo Goal magazine, you absolutely should be. Now, if I was to describe what the magazine is, I would say it's a weird, in the best possible way, eclectic mix of articles and feature writing on basically anything football. So, for example, I have the last issue from last year beside me now, and it could be something as sort of mainstream as a piece on maybe Christian Pulisic or Mesut Ozil, or it could be as obscure as a piece on Yugoslavian side Vojvodina, who gave Celtic a scare on their way to European success in 1968. So it's a real mix of everything, isn't it, James?
Yeah, that's a good description, Connell. I think it's basically what we wanted to do was make a magazine that looked as good as the writing was good inside. So the design and the illustrations and photography is as important as the quality of the writing. And that comes from my brother, the co-editor. Key is a graphic designer, and I have a journalism background. So it's a kind of perfect mix of both of them. And we were kind of inspired by those other publications like the Blizzard or Howler, those kind of magazines that took a deeper dive into football stories, but there wasn't anything coming from Ireland. And we've always felt, we use this phrase a lot, football culture. Irish football culture is just as valid as any other country's. And growing up following League of Ireland and the Premier League, we brought our passion into this project. So that's where it came from, really.
Yeah, it's football culture. It's a hard thing to sort of pin down, but just like there's a piece there on, I think, the 90s team, Nantes in France. And how, like, I had never knew that they were a big deal back then. I'm only 20. Nantes are they even in the top division in France now?
I couldn't tell you.
Exactly. So just, I love pieces like that. They're absolutely fantastic. And you touched upon that you want this sort of appearance and, you know, artwork photography to be as important as the writing. And that is very, very clear. I have it here. Obviously, we're not going to be doing this in video format, but just look up Póg Mo Goal magazine and look at the new issue. It's sort of like a Gazzetta dello Sport. It's got the pink and it looks beautiful. And one thing I actually love about the design is the fact that the contents are right in the cover. It's a strange artistic choice, but I do really like it.
Yeah, that would be down to Key. We've probably stubborn brothers bashed heads on that, but I've learned over the years to go with his judgment. Mm-hmm. So this is our 6th edition, but issues 1 to 4 would have been in newsprint format, so essentially looked like a newspaper. And mm-hmm. in those editions, we were able to give white space. So in other words, one illustration could take up 2 whole pages of a newsprint, which is very unusual. We decided in the last issue we wanted to step things up a little bit and put something a bit sturdier that would last longer. All of these editions are intended to be a keepsake. You can probably tell by the writing. They're quite evergreen. Take a look back into history or take one aspect that doesn't date very much. So the idea is that you would like these editions enough to hold on to them. And that's where the design comes into it.
Yeah, because I have an office in this house. We're actually moving in a couple of weeks, but it's the other end of the house, so the internet isn't any use. So it's like, you know, obviously with online college and that, recording the podcast. So I had to move the table down here to the front sitting room, which we don't use an awful lot. And there's absolutely nothing on it. And I was like, what can I put on this just to make it look a bit nicer? So I have a book on Dundalk's double win in 2018. I've got Inverting the Pyramid by Jonathan Wilson, and I've got the Póg Mo Goal issue 5 here because it just looks class.
We're in good company there, so thanks very much.
Exactly, yeah. So talking about the magazine, the origins, where did it start and where did that idea come from?
So we're followers of football. My family would be a football family. Even though we're from Kilkenny, we're a soccer family, and we've just grown up playing it, being interested in it. I worked in journalism, in sports journalism for various outlets in the UK and Ireland and Germany. And Key and my other brother Graham, who originally started as an artist, Key is a graphic designer. So when you put your passion or your work into a hobby like this, that's where it stemmed from. So we began as a website or a blog as it was in those days. So it's about 9 years ago. And blogging was becoming very popular in that it was kind of crossing into the mainstream. You would see bloggers being referred to in publications like The Guardian talking about football. So blogs were becoming more and more popular. You had blogs on Arsenal and Liverpool becoming more prominent, but there wasn't anything really coming from Ireland. So we started out as a kind of an irreverent look at the Irish national team, which is where the name came from, really. But partly because one person's funny is another person's irritating, it was hard to sustain it. And partly because covering the Irish team became a bit of a slog.
Yeah.
We qualified for the Euros in 2012, which was brilliant for being 1 year into running the website. But as we all know, that didn't go very well on the pitch. And from then on, just kind of reporting on the Irish team just became repetitive. And so we decided to indulge in our passions, which was Keith's very big on design and gear, the latest looks, crests, this kind of thing. And that's where it just naturally stemmed from there into a publication. So as there isn't really anything like this being done from an Irish viewpoint. And this isn't our full-time jobs or anything. It's very much a passion project. But we're on to our 6th edition now, and people seem to like what we're doing. And as we have in every other issue, we're using contributors, not just from Ireland, but from countries all over the world.
Actually, that's a wonderful transition onto my next bit, because you've got contributors here in issue 5 from the likes of England, Ireland, obviously, Sweden, America, France, Austria, Northern Ireland, Italy, Serbia, Japan, etc. I could go on there.
Yes.
How do you go about getting people to contribute to the magazine? Do you just send off a load of emails? Is it very targeted? And in terms of actually the production of it, is it any more difficult during COVID?
Well, we welcome contributors from anyone. So anywhere, anyone's can get in touch with us to write for our website. Over the years, we've built up a bit of a following, and certain writers and designers that we like, that we go to. But it's a combination of writing and design. So Key will approach the designers again in our latest issue, 6th issue. Just to give you an idea, contributors again from USA, Netherlands, France, Brazil, Poland, Argentina, Colombia. So it's a real eclectic mix. And then kind of up and coming Irish journalists or people looking for a break, or who've just got in touch with us over the years. So we have some go-to writers and contributors, but the door is open to everybody to get in touch with us and write for the website. And in that respect, we're always blown away by the fact that we're based in Ireland, but we reach out to some of these designers who work with massive brands like Adidas and Puma and football clubs. But when they see that it comes from Ireland, they're really interested to be involved. And that's always really heartening, that we ask them to contribute and they want to. So I like, again, asking someone from Argentina, for example, to illustrate a story on a League of Ireland club. I think that's a really nice collaboration to see what they come up with, because they've probably never heard of them to start with, but that doesn't stop them getting involved.
Yeah, and is it any more difficult to get it just published, like physically published in COVID, or is it even better because people are at home and saying, order a magazine?
We have a loyal following. We're really grateful to anyone who purchases the magazine. It's never easy to publish, to self-publish or independently publish. We bang the mantra that print is not dead, but for advertisers, it can be very difficult to get advertising in. So we've opened pre-orders at the moment, and pre-orders is really what supports us to bring it out. If people like what we do and could pre-order, that helps us to bring it to fruition, and then we can bring the print run to the masses. So it's not easy to be an independent publisher. We don't have a sugar daddy or an Abramovich backing us to publish this. But I think if something's worth doing well, if doing at all, and that's where we come from. We want to do something of high quality to the best that we can do, that people we think will enjoy looking at as much as reading.
And the issue 6 is out next month. What can people expect from that? What's some of your favorite features in it?
So again, it's a mix of, as per usual, Irish stories, along with stories from, as you say, the weird and the wonderful. I myself have written a piece on Cuban football because I think you could pick any country in the world or any club in the world or even any club in Ireland. And if you dig deep enough, you'll find an interesting story. And in researching about Cuba, you find that since the revolution in the 50s, they banned professional sport. And so while they have a football league there, many Cubans who played with the national team or went on tour to the USA would defect and not go back to Cuba, partly to pursue a dream of being a footballer and also to pursue a better life.
Yeah.
And I think there are stories of like youth teams and Olympic teams. So very young kids or very young adults leaving to go to America and not returning because they wanted to pursue another life in the USA. And I thought that was really interesting. So in terms of Irish content, there are features on Liam Brady, who's like a beloved figure both in Ireland, then among Arsenal fans, and of course in Italy for his time at Juve and Sampdoria. There's even a piece on Katie Taylor, who people may know she played football for Ireland, but there's a little story of while she was an underage international, her roommate would find her shadow boxing in her hotel room, which I think is, if you think about what Katie Taylor's gone on to achieve, the idea that combining international football and at the same time training to be a boxer, I think is amazing. And then historic pieces about Ireland and Bohemians in the time of the Spanish flu, pieces on Shamrock Rovers, and then other pieces about people like Eric Cantona, even Maradona, and even, again, we expand on a piece we did in post-Yugoslavian football in issue 5. We look at it from another angle in this issue, which is on a club called RNK Split, which lots of people have heard of Hajduk Split. And this is their kind of cross-city rival who are lesser-known club. So I think there's something for everyone in it, long-form and short-form pieces. And at the same time, photography spreads and graphic design that make it, as I keep saying, just as good to look at as to read.
Yeah, so absolutely looking forward to that. I'm going to put the link in the description for anyone who wants to buy that new issue. It's only €6, which when I went on, I couldn't believe it was that cheap. It's absolutely well worth it. I remember I got the issue 5 because they were giving out free copies at the first lockdown. And I was like, oh yeah, like I've never actually got around to getting one of these. And well worth €6, I can tell you. So I'll put that in the description. But alongside the magazine, you've now launched your own podcast, which is how I got the idea to get you on the podcast. So just in terms of the podcast, is this going to be running alongside the magazine? Is it going to be coming out every week, or are the subjects, are they completely different, completely separate to the magazine?
We'd always wanted to launch a podcast. We wanted to do something a little different though, in that this is launched directly to coincide with the launch of the magazine. So to start with, the guests are people who have contributed to issue 6. So the first episode is with the author of a piece called Training Day, based on a bomb scare at Old Trafford. I don't know if you remember this. It's about 4 years ago. I vaguely remember it happening, but it kind of passed into the news cycle relatively quickly. So the author, Taylor Gill, revisits it. But in fact, Taylor was a young journalist working on the story. And the piece is about the security firm that was largely held responsible. It was essentially a one-man band. And this horde of journalists turned up at his house the next day. And Taylor was amongst them. And how, expecting a kind of someone to reject the responsibility, he held his hands up and said, no, I was responsible for this. I think that's a really interesting story, allied with the fact that Manchester has had its share of kind of bomb scares and bomb reality in the past. So that's that story. And issue 2 then is about Pavel Nedved, who I didn't know actually something in his physical makeup, whereas the regular person has one kneecap, his knee is made up of 3 parts. So this is really interesting to just explore if it hampered him or helped him to become the legendary player that he is, especially in Juventus. And then the last episode refers to that incident with Bohemians in the time of influenza about 100 years ago, which is both very historical and very topical with the times we're living in. So the intention will be that we'll produce more. We've got 5 other issues that we could delve back in to bring guests on to discuss. So hopefully people will enjoy it, and it's a little bit different to the other podcasts out there.
I've only listened to the Bohemians one so far, but I'm going to go back and listen to the United one, because as a Manchester United fan, I do remember that quite well. I was going over to Barcelona that day, and I remember it was the last day of the season,
Yes.
and I was on the flight when the match was supposed to happen. So I remember getting off the plane being like, wonder if United won or whatever, and seeing all this thing happen. So yeah, that was the last game of the season. So they all play at 3:00 or 4:00. All the games happen at the same time. But I actually ended up getting to watch it the next day, so it had to be postponed. So yeah, quite strange. And Pavel Nedved, that's quite strange. I'm definitely gonna have to listen to that one.
Yeah, well, I think what we wanted to do differently was the people who went and researched it, so to get their take on it. And we tried to have create a little bit of conversation about other topics. So the Nedved conversation expanded into players in general who maybe would fail a medical in the strictest sense nowadays, but actually went on to be great players. So I think there's a little for everyone in the podcast. And we hope, if people like them, we hope to continue them.
Yeah, so I'll leave the link to subscribe to all the podcasts on Spotify, Apple. I'm sure you're on all them. So I'll leave the link in the description as well. So make sure to follow that. And James, you're an Arsenal fan. So
Yes.
Coming at it from a Premier League perspective, what have you made of Arsenal's recent form? Arteta seems to be coming under some pressure. I personally think that's very harsh on him.
It's typical Arsenal, isn't it? I have a lot of my friends who are Arsenal fans will send messages to each other that you can never rely on Arsenal. They will go on a run. Usually they have a wobble around Christmas time and can't sustain a title challenge. Other times they might do it in reverse, have a good Christmas. So I personally was happy Arteta took the job. I think you can't learn from anyone better than Guardiola. He's a young manager. He's younger than me. He hasn't a grey hair on his head. That may well change if he stays in the dugout at the Emirates, but you have to stick with him. He's been quite ruthless in terms of how he treated Ozil and Guendouzi. So I do think he has the bottle to really have an impact. As ever with Arsenal, transfer windows are a huge part of it. So Arsenal is Arsenal. They won't sustain a title run, but as they did last season, they may challenge for something like the FA Cup. So don't include Arsenal in your football accumulators, but it's even harder to be a fan if you're trying to rely on them.
Yeah, it wasn't too long ago that people were singing his praises. They came to Old Trafford, the 1-1-0, perfectly executed game plan, and now just a couple of games later, people are jumping on his back. And it's kind of Arsenal fans that I'm seeing who are saying he was amazing and he was the best thing since sliced bread. And now a couple of games later, they're saying he's not good enough. And it's so fickle. And considering he's working with really not a great squad, it's pretty easily the weakest squad in the top 6, I'd say.
I think someone like Pepe, they spend huge money on, is not contributing. He doesn't contribute goals. He hasn't really physically bulked up since they signed him. The squad is a very average squad. I won't win any of my fellow Arsenal fans over, but I also find a lot of Arsenal fans fickle and quite irritating. I think Arsenal fan TV became a phenomenon, but it became a national phenomenon or an international phenomenon when they were calling for Wenger's head.
Yeah.
So they are only popular when they are being overtly negative. Mm-hmm. And when the team is playing well, they're a non-event. I don't have a great deal of time for that kind of thing amongst Arsenal's fan base. No more than we need to do with Stephen Kenny in the Irish job. You have to give a manager time to get his philosophy across. And as ever with Arsenal, if you're not backed with a budget in the transfer window, you have to wait and let the man work.
Yeah, it's just these sensationalist takes just every single time. If you go on, we'll get on to the sort of Arsenal against Dundalk thing that's just managed to happen somehow. But I remember there was reactions coming out. They film themselves watching every single game. I'm sure you know yourself where they're sort of, all the seats are aligned. And it was against Dundalk, and they were going crazy.
Yeah.
They were going crazy for every goal. I can promise you that's not how you were reacting. You were like, nice one, we scored. Because it's a Europa League game at home to Dundalk. Nothing is that dramatic. They were going in front when Pepe scored, doing that, and it's horrible.
I spoke to you just before we came on, Conal, and you said you're a Dundalk fan. So you go to games, and that's the difference. How many of those Arsenal fans go to games? Okay, yes, the Arsenal Fan TV guys are there outside the ground, so they're obviously at the matches. But in a previous life, I worked in Germany as a social media manager for the Bundesliga, running their English accounts. And I'm always fascinated about this kind of global appeal of following Borussia Dortmund from Japan or the UK or France or the USA, and this kind of faux obsession. How much can you really be a fan of a club when all you do is watch them on TV, maybe at 2:00 in the morning if you're in one side of the world? So this kind of plastic obsession doesn't wash with me. And it's almost done to an extreme level to compensate for the fact that you don't go to games. And that would be my take on it. That won't win me any fans or any kudos, but I think that's a very real thing. It's compensating for like going crazy for scoring a goal against Dundalk in the Europa League. It's like, come on, it's not really realistic, is it?
Yeah, absolutely not. That's where we got the name for our podcast, because we are Irish Premier League fans and we just wanted to acknowledge that. Do you know what I mean? Yeah. We're not trying to say that we don't acknowledge the League of Ireland. It's just, we're Barstoolers in this very sense. We chose a team when we were 8 years old, and it sticks with you, doesn't it?
I think we could talk for hours about that whole the Barstooler thing. I think if you acknowledge it, then you're on the way to recognizing it. So, but you go to games or you follow League of Ireland. I'm the same. I grew up watching League of Ireland. I class myself as an Arsenal fan because just like you, I picked a team when I was 8 years old, and 3 decades later, that's a lot of time to invest in following a club. Yeah. And you can go to any country in the world and they will follow the Premier League. So this idea of looking down your nose at someone for being a Barstooler is not on. But at the same time, if you are a Barstooler, recognize it. Yeah,
because sometimes you do get League of Ireland snobbery. You absolutely do. People absolutely talking down. And it's not the way. You don't get someone to come to League of Ireland matches by giving out to them. Yeah.
We could talk for hours about this, Conal. I like the principle of support your local club, but the reality of Ireland and Ireland's makeup is not everyone has a local club. And when you grow up with tribalism and GAA, parish versus parish, county versus county, it's not in our makeup to support a team from a neighboring county, whatever the code. And you have to recognize that. And so this constant banging of support your local club works in some senses and not in the other, and not in another. So we really need to recognize we're not going to win people over by looking down our noses at them.
As I said, in issue 5, you have a piece on Mesut Ozil. What's your take on him just not being involved in the squad at all? Surely he could contribute something, especially in the money he's on.
Arteta disappoints me a little bit with that. I thought he was going to be a coach who could get something out of him. At the start he was playing Ozil. I don't really like these public statements from a manager by leaving a player training with the under-20s, for example. I think if you're a coach, then coach. Get the best out of a player. We can all recognize Ozil on his day can be a fantastic player, so coach him. And if the club's not going to get the money for him, he's wasting away sitting on the stand. So I think it can be quite petty, and that has disappointed me with Arteta. He doesn't seem to have the work rate. Maybe he doesn't have the work rate for Arteta's style, but coach him then. Yeah. Coach the game plan into him. And if it doesn't work, then go to the board and get rid of him.
Yeah, and we touched slightly earlier on Arsenal against Dundalk. Obviously I'm a Dundalk fan, but as a League of Ireland fan yourself, unfortunately you weren't able to get to it. But seeing the League of Ireland team play Arsenal, was that surreal for you?
It's huge. And I was supporting Dundalk,
Yeah.
100%. So even messaging Arsenal colleagues and friends, they were saying like we, and so I'm saying I'm actually up for the Irish team here, and I thought they did really well. They were sucker punched just before half time, and again just after half time. So the people who criticise League of Ireland will still criticise it, even though we have teams in the Europa League group stages. Now they may not win a game, but they won games and drew in the last time in the Europa League. This I know. Not everyone will agree with this, but I do believe the rising tide lifts all boats. So to have Irish clubs in these competitions does raise the standard, because if you want to compete with Dundalk and Shamrock Rovers and get to their level, that's where you have to aim for. When Shamrock Rovers played Spurs in London in the Europa League a couple of years ago, I was at that game, and it's one of the best experiences I had in football. The Rovers fans were brilliant that day, but I wasn't sat with them, but when Rovers went 1-0 up, Irish people all around the stadium were going crazy. And we got a few we could have got a few slaps where we were. Most people kind of recognize us that, again, as you say, we've gone behind here to a small, without wanting to be offensive, club. And, but it was brilliant to see so many London Irish people react to the Irish club going ahead. And unfortunately, we didn't get to experience it with Arsenal this time around. But you never know what might happen in Tala, if it's in Tala.
Yeah, it'll be in the Aviva, I think.
Or
which
the
actually
Aviva.
works to our disadvantage, I think. A big pitch like that, I think Arsenal, well, they didn't tear us apart exactly in the Emirates, but we didn't exactly lay a glove on them. But which I wasn't expecting to. As a Dundalk fan, I was so happy watching the match. Like, even when they scored, it was like, when they scored the third goal, I said, the floodgate's going to open here. But the game plan was pretty much perfect, because we did a preview of it on the channel. Yeah. And I was saying to my mate Ronan, it's like, I'd be delighted with a 3-0 loss here. Yeah. Because I think there has to be a sense of realism, because the League of Ireland, the Premier League, it's two different sports. You absolutely cannot be expected. And in general, I think people did praise Dundalk and said, yeah, fair play. Like, they didn't look out of place. But there was even some people sneering because we didn't commit a foul and stuff.
I think on social media especially, there was a lot of praise for Dundalk from Arsenal fans, which I think is great to see, about the style they were trying to play. You'd probably acknowledge yourself, this isn't a Dundalk team on a par with the last one in the Europa League. They probably had a little bit of luck in terms of the teams they had to play to get into this one, and they're under transition with the new Italian coach. So, but you take what you have. You take a team an Irish team in the Europa League all day long. So it can only raise the standard for those players and for the teams trying to compete with them. Be very interested to see what Rovers can do now next season.
Yeah, my Irish, the badge of honour I have for being a follower of the domestic game might be called into question if Rovers get a couple of good results. I might start begrudging them then. So for Arsenal, obviously we're early on the season. Do you think you can get top 4, or do you need January? Do you need to bolster your squad in January?
I think top 4 is always a good achievement. It would be a good achievement for Arsenal. In terms of, like, Man City are having a lot of stumbles. Liverpool are weaker in some senses with Van Dijk out and that. But they're still probably miles ahead of everyone. I think it'd be very difficult for Arsenal to get top 4. But at some point, they're going to go on a run. I do think Arteta has brought a bit more steel into them. I don't think they're the walkover they were. They often struggled against the so-called smaller teams in the past, and he has instilled a little bit of steel in them. But again, I would say, if you're not going to play Ozil, if Pepe is not really up to it, and the bench seems to be forever full of kids with potential, you probably do need to spend in January. But as ever with Arsenal, will he be given the money? So it's a perpetual same old Arsenal for Arsenal fans. I know lots of other people will be saying, I'd give my right arm to be challenging for a top 4. But that's that's the nature of Arsenal fans.
Yeah, you might well be playing Shamrock Rovers in the Europa League next season, but time will tell.
Yeah.
But thanks very much for coming on the podcast, James. Absolute pleasure to talk to you. As I said earlier on, I'll leave all the links in the description to the website to buy the new edition of the magazine, to your podcast links. All that will be in the description. Thanks very much for coming on, James.
Thank you, Conal. Really enjoyed it.
So going on to the predictions for this weekend's games, if you look at the prediction league, in which the winner will get a jersey courtesy of the other three, it doesn't make for good reading for me, because I slipped down to the bottom this week as Ronan got 6 points. He correctly predicted Liverpool. No.
Spurs 2-0 against City.
He correctly predicted Spurs to beat City 2-0, so that took him above me. I'm on 23 points. He's on 25. Mix is on 27, and James is out in front on 32. But the games we are predicting for this week, we're going to start with the big one. Chelsea at home to Spurs, which James alluded to earlier on. This one, it's tough. They're two informed teams. Chelsea are definitely doing better now. It's at Stamford Bridge. I'm going to go with a 1-0 Chelsea win. I think Chelsea are going to perform. Spurs will revert back to type a little bit.
I'm going for a 1-1. I just think it's Mourinho against an old club. He's always kind of up for it. And Spurs, whatever Chelsea, I don't think Chelsea have been good against any of the big teams they played this year. They weren't great against United. They were pretty piss poor against Liverpool. Plus, I also think Spurs are just playing better football and they're better organised. They will be without Alderweireld. So that might be, if they have to play your man Rodden at the back, so that might be, Chelsea might be able to take advantage of that with Timo Werner if he shows up. But other than that, I think we go for a 1-1 draw. I don't really see either team being overly better. If either team was going to win, I would say Spurs, but I'm going for a draw.
I am also going to go for a draw, but I'm going to go for a 2-2 draw. And my heart would say Mourinho wins, slap Frank Lampard about the gaff, because Frank's the worst, isn't he? We all want to see him get sacked ASAP, Rocky. But Mourinho, I don't think lightning's going to strike twice for him this week. And I think, I'm going with a draw. I think Bale's going to come back to the side. Havertz is back for Chelsea. They're just going to cancel each other out. So, fancy a draw on this one.
It's a tough one, this one. Like, I've been thinking about it a lot, but I'm going to have to give a prediction now, aren't I?
You're on the spot.
I'm going to go... God, this is difficult. It's a good game. Two sides in good form. 2-1 Chelsea. Not much else to add to that. Two sides in good form.
Cheers for that.
Yeah.
So going to the next game, I don't want to be too harsh on Arteta, because I actually think he's doing a good job. When I said he was the David Moyes with nice hair, just being devil's advocate there. But there's no doubting they're struggling at the minute. Wolves are coming to town this weekend. Arsenal are travelling to Norway on the Thursday to play Molde in the Europa League. And as critical as I've been about Wolves this season, I see them going to Arsenal and getting the job done. I think they're going to win 2-1 to heap pressure on Mikel Arteta.
That is a very interesting assessment. I have to say, when I found out Daniel Podence was 25 this week, I lost a bit of faith in humanity. So they've dropped the ball a bit. Nuno's dropped the ball. They're away at Arsenal. Oh, I don't know. I'm gonna go for 2-0. I'm gonna go not 2-0. I'm gonna go for the reverse. I'm gonna go for 2-1 Arsenal. I think Arteta is gonna get the monkeys off his back this game.
I probably go for something similar. I don't know. Maybe 1-0 Arsenal. I don't think Wolves look brilliant at all this season. Didn't think they were great this week against Southampton, and I watched them a week before against Leicester as well. They haven't impressed me once this season. Even I can't remember what game I watched. The one that won against Leeds was one I watched as well. I didn't think they were brilliant in that either. So yeah, I'm going for 1-0 Arsenal.
I'm going to go for a serious 0-0 here. Just two very uninspiring teams. Wolves, they haven't got off well at all. They've lost Doherty and Jota. Two massive players for them. Jimenez has been pretty bad. Arsenal, as we said before, they're Arsenal. They're not very good. So, yeah, pretty poor game, this one.
So next game, very interesting game, I think. Southampton at home against Manchester United. And As a United fan, I'm not exactly looking forward to this one. I do think, obviously, Ings is injured at the moment, so there'll be no Danny Ings. I think that makes Southampton considerably less dangerous. But I think, then again, you have to factor in no fans. St. Mary's, it's not a great place to go. I was kind of thinking about fans at St. Mary's. But now I'm going to stick to my prediction 1-1, where both sides kind of think they can get a result, but they're just a bit cagey. 1-1.
Right. I'm 5-1 United. And the reason 5-1 United is because I am doubling up my United assets with Rashford and Bruno in the FPL sense. And I have Che Adams too. So Che is going to get a wee consolation goal like he did, I believe. Oh, sorry, that was Joshua King I had away at Old Trafford last season, and it was the 5-1. So this is going to happen again once at a Bournemouth, Southampton. But yeah, just Ralph Hasenhüttl, let's just get that smug grin off his face that he has at the minute. Let's do it, Ole. Go on.
I think Southampton are good. I'm pretty impressed with this season so far, but without Danny Ings, they still offer a good bit going forward. Che Allen's been brilliant, and James R-Price started well this season, and even Walcott looks decent. But United away from home actually seem to be a little bit more competent this season than when they play at Old Trafford for whatever reason. So I'm going to go for I think they're going to sneak a 2-1 victory. It's going to be a tight match, though.
So I'm going to go for 2-2 in this one. Alpine Klopp, he's going to get the draw against United. Yeah, it's a shame that Ings is injured. I would love to see him slap a few past United, but hopefully Che Adams, United drop some more points. Good win for the Premier League. Or good, what am I on about? Win. A good result for the Premier League.
So going on to the next game, I picked this game because I think it's really close to call because both teams have been miserable this season. It's West Brom at home to Sheffield United, and the Blades, they just haven't been the same at all this season. Again, it's kind of hard to pinpoint what it is, but I think they're just reverting back to type a little bit because obviously last season they just way exceed expectations. But I think West Brom aren't as bad as some people make out. I love Mateus Pereira, Grady Diangana, Callum Robinson. They have a really dynamic front three. And I think they're finally going to get a win because Sheffield United, mentally, they can't be in a good place. I'm sure they're questioning what's going on. So 1-0 West Brom.
Is Callum Robinson on a permanent, actually?
Yeah.
Okay, so he could come home to roost now for Blades. I'd fancy that, to be honest with you. But yeah, I'm going to go with a 2-0 West Brom. Just put the pressure on Blades at the minute. They're just having pure second season syndrome, and if this continues, you tip them to be the third team to go down.
I can't believe I'm saying this, but I'm also going to go for West Brom. I'm really fond of Sheffield United and Chris Wilder. They're just a bit shit at the minute, aren't they? I think they're actually dead last in the Premier League now after Burnley's win at the weekend. So they need to get results soon, and I don't see them getting results. This will be one day where they could pick up a result, actually, which might help the confidence, but even West Brom have looked a little bit better than them. Shit at the back, but they've got a few going forward that look kind of decent. Callum Robinson's a little bit dangerous. Diangana's pretty good. Pereira is all right. So yeah, I'm going to go for a close 2-0 victory to West Brom.
West Brom 2-0. They're a lot better going forward than Sheffield. And Sheffield, they offer nothing going forward. So I can't imagine them testing West Brom's defence too much. And Ramsdale is an awful goalkeeper. Henderson, they didn't know how well they had it with Henderson last season. Rumour has it that Ramsdale has never made a save in the Premier League ever. So sure that goal will be getting peppered by Robinson and the boys the weekend. I
do remember saying when they signed him that I didn't rate him. I can't remember who it was. It mightn't have been any of you, but I remember just being thoroughly unimpressed with him. But anyway, going on to the next game. Two teams that have had good starts this season to varying extents, but it's West Ham at home to Villa. West Ham, to their credit, Moyes is doing a good job. He's got a pretty limited squad in some areas, but I don't know, they're just defensively they're solid, and then they always seem to find a way to score. However, I'm going to go back on that opinion I have because I don't think they're going to score this week. I think Villa, it's weird. Villa last season, I kind of hated them as a team. I thought they're terrible, and now I really enjoy watching them. Just that addition of Ross Barkley and Ollie Watkins has helped Jack Grealish out immensely. So I'm going to go with 2-0 Aston Villa win at London Stadium.
I'm going to go for a 2-1 Villa win. Like yourself, I think West Ham would look very good at the back, but they don't really offer too much going forward. They always seem to manage to get a goal. But I was kind of passively watching the match there against Sheffield United at the weekend. I don't really know what to make of West Ham because they're good, but they're not. I don't really know what to say because they're a shit squad, and I don't like. Well, they're not shit squad. Their base 11's decent, but there's no players in there that are really brilliant. Fornal's all right. Souček is decent.
They're the best shit team ever.
Yeah, yeah, that's just a good way to put it. So yeah, I'm still gonna go for 2-1 Villa win. I don't think they're gonna be too upset or too affected by the Brighton result at the weekend.
Yeah, I'm going to say 1-0 Villa. There's a lot weird about West Ham, as we're touching on there. Like Moyes and Antonio, although Antonio's flying, and I don't know if he's coming back for this game. That's a confliction of styles. Like West Ham want to go towards the Europa League. Yeah, so I'm going to go for a 1-0 Villa win here. I think I've been very impressed with Grealish. They're going to want to have a response this game. And West Ham, there's a bit of a confliction of styles as what they're trying to do. You know, look at your Fornals, look at all these different ballers in the club, and then you've got guys like Antonio still knocking in goals, but they're just never going to achieve what they want when they're sort of such a big contradiction as a club at the minute. So yeah, 1-0 win for the Villa, get them back on track at the London Stadium.
I'm going to go with a slight bit of a bold one. Villa are going to come out with some fire in the belly. They're going to put 4 past West Ham. Keep them out, shut out, clean sheet, 4-0 Villa, Grealish hat-trick, Olivier Watkins, 1 goal as well.
As Joe Rogan would say, it's entirely possible. But that just brings a close to the end of our podcast. So as always, if you're watching on YouTube, I'd really appreciate if you like, subscribe. We love doing this. It's definitely a passion project, but we do appreciate when we do get some feedback. If you're on the streaming platforms, appreciate just following, downloading, all that stuff's great. Thought that was a great episode. Fantastic interview with James Carew from Póg Mo Goal. Again, all the links to their socials and to buy issue 6 of the magazine are in the description. And as always, we'll be back next week with another episode. Thank you for listening.